Hello everyone. In today's class, we'll be continuing with conversing with Python. Now we have a word and we try to frame a simple sentence that we know in Python, right? So for that, before I start writing a sentence using those words, we need to know how to start conversation using Python, basically to test our language skills, right? So before that, you need to install the Python software on your computer, and you should learn how to write, how to start Python on your computer. Okay, so you can just go to www.py4e.com and you can start installing the Python for your Windows systems. Okay, and soon after, the Python interpreter will start executing in interactive mode, and it tries to appear somewhat like this. Okay, you would see that these are the commands which will be displayed on your Python interpreter, and the three lines here with arrow marks. Okay, this is a prompt which is displayed on the Python's interpreters. It is way of like asking you. The Python interpreter is asking you, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do next? Okay, so now Python is ready to have a conversation with you. So in order to express, okay, that Python is ready, this is the prompt where you can see. I'll just highlight, these are the three arrow marks, okay, line which has been used to convey the user needs. Okay, let us say for example, you did not know the simplest Python language words or the sentences. You might want to use the standard line where you want to uh, tell directly to the processor using your Python language, and you will end up with the invalid syntax. Okay, so for that, you want to print something, no? You cannot tell it directly. You should give your what do you want, the task, okay, what do you want to get it done from your processor. Using this Python, you are supposed to give a valid syntax. Okay, so the valid syntax utilizes all those reserved words which we have discussed previously. Say that you want to tell the processor to print hello world. Okay, so for that you have a command called print, open the bracket, within the quotes you should type what you want to display. Okay, so you can see that you are commanding the processor or interpreter, okay, with these three arrow mark lines, and informing the interpreter that you print. Okay, print is an instruction or a reserved word. You are informing the processor to print hello world. Is that clear? Okay, now say that if um, you have missed something, say for example you have missed the parenthesis while giving the print instruction. Okay, that I have missed the quotes, one side of the quotes here, and I have missed closing the brackets. Okay, now what does the interpreter does? It tries to execute the syntax, okay, and it will show the error saying that in this line 1, okay, we are missing with parenthesis, okay, in print syntax. Is that clear? And if you want to just quit the Python, you can directly give, there is a command called quit. Okay, you can use this quit and say you can come out of the Python. Say for example you want to come out of the Python, you can also like say if I'll give something like goodbye. Okay, Do you think your interpreter will analyze this command? Because I am telling you goodbye. Do you think the Python will understand what you are trying to tell? No. You are supposed to use those, you have to converse with the Python using the proper reserved words. Okay. Say that if you want to quit, then you are supposed to use a command called quit with braces. Okay. Now, here you will notice that the error is different, okay, for the incorrect attempts. If you are missing some instructions, okay, instructional rules, okay, or if you are missing the command itself, okay, so it shows an error. Okay. Next we'll talk about the terminology that is called as interpreter and compiler. Okay. Python, we know that it is a high level language, okay, which is a straightforward language to all the users, okay, in order to read or write uh, or you want to interact with your computers. Okay, so it is a straightforward language. Other high level languages like Java, you have C++, Ruby, Basics, PHP, Perl. There are many more languages. Okay, um, even they are termed to be like high level languages. The actual hardware internally, what you find is the processor. It does not understand any of these high level languages. Keep in mind, you tell any high level language, okay, which we have mentioned many here, but the processor will never understand. The CPU understands only the machine language. Machine language is a simple language where it is represented in zeros and ones. And machine language seems like quite simple on the surface, but actually when a syntax is given, it is even more complex, okay, and like far more intricate than Python. Okay, so very few programmers even write machine languages. Okay, keep in mind, instead like we try to use the high level languages like Python or Java, these like these languages are need to be like translated or converted into machine language. So in order to make it more simple, people are there, even they write the machine language coding. Okay, but here the machine language is tied with the computer hardware, and it is not a portable language, okay, where you can use however you want. Fine. So uh, uh, across hardware, no, you cannot just directly deal with the machine level language. Only the processor are meant to process the information using the machine language. Okay. Now programs, now what we are writing, they are written using the high level languages, and they can be moved from different computers, okay, by using, if you want to use a different interpreter, and you want to compile or recompile the code using a specific coding language, you can do it, and you can convert it into machine language as the processor will does that. Okay, and these programming translators are being categorized into two general categories. Okay, what we are talking is the translators. That is, your high level languages need to be translated, or it is moved between different computers. Okay, whenever it is being like translated, for that you need a translators, right? So one is interpreters, other one is the compiler. Okay, so an interpreter, it basically reads the source code of the program, whatever it has been written by the programmer. Okay, and he tries to parse the source code and interprets the instructions on the fly. Okay, so I repeat once again, you are talking about an interpreter. Okay, it is a programming language translator, and whenever we are trying to run Python programming, Python is an interpreter now, and whenever you are running the Python, then we can type this Python and Python sentences, what we call, and the Python processes it immediately processes the statements, and it's ready for us to type another line of Python. Okay, say that here I'm talking, if I type x is equal to 6 and print x, okay, it prints x, that is, what is the value of x? It is 6. Now it is ready for us to type another line. Okay, say that y is equal to x into 7, and I tell print y. What is that? Y comprises of x into 7. X is already, we have stored the value as 6, right? So 6 into 7, and it displays a result as 42. Okay, so in this example we ask the Python to remember the value of 6. Hopefully you are understanding. Okay, we are asking the Python to remember the value of 6 and use that label x so that we retrieve the value later. Okay, and we make use of the value using the print. Okay, then we ask the Python to retrieve x and multiply it with 7. Okay, and that value is being stored in y. When we ask the Python to print out the value currently in y, it displays the value of y. Okay, so when we talk about an interpreter, it is the nature of an interpreter to be able to have an interactive conversation as we have shown here. Okay, next comes the compilers. When we talk about the compiler, a compiler basically it is required to, let us discuss about the compiler. Uh, what is the basic difference between an interpreter and a compiler is, interpreter is able to have an interactive conversation. Okay, say it tries to execute one and it waits for the second, and the process is like step by step. Okay, but in case of compiler, it is needed to be handed over the entire program in a file, and then the compiler runs a process to translate that whatever the high level language program is been handed over to the compiler, right? That entire high level language source code is converted into machine language. Then the compiler starts processing over the machine language, and processor starts processing the machine language, and the compiler puts the resulting machine language into a file for later execution. Okay, so here when we tell about the machine level language programs, it is really not so easy to write. And if you have a Windows system, often like these executable machine language programs, they end up with a suffix of .exe. Okay, so you might have seen some of the executable files, okay, which has a suffix or an extension of .exe or .dll. Hope you have seen. So which stands for what? .exe is executable, and .dll is dynamic link library. Okay, so in case of Linux, or if you think of some Macintosh softwares or systems, there is no suffix that uniquely marks a file as executable. But in case of Windows, we have specifically which marks the executable file as .exe and .dll. Okay, so we have these interpreters and compilers which allow us to write in high level languages like Python or C++, C, etc. Okay, so the Python interpreter is yeah, Python interpreter, it is written in a high level language called C. Okay, and you can look at some of the actual source code for Python interpreter by uh, clicking on www.python.org. I'll write here. Okay. Okay, it's taking some time, so I'll just convey it as www.python.org. Okay, so where you can look into the actual source code for Python interpreter. Okay, and working your way to their source code. Okay, so basically Python is a program itself. Okay, and it is compiled into a machine code. Okay, so when you install the Python on your computer, you copy a machine code uh, of your translated Python program onto your system. Okay, say that in your Windows, the executable machine code for Python itself is likely in a file with something with a name which is given like python.exe. Okay, so those are the formats of executable machine code if you are using a Windows system. Okay, now we are going to talk about how basically you are going to write a program. Okay, typing the commands in Python interpreter, it is a very good experiment. Okay, it is with good Python features. Okay, but it is not recommended for solving some of the complex problems. Okay, so when we want to write a program, we can use a text editor to write this Python instructions. Okay, which we call it as like a script. You know what is script? What is script? It is a script. It is a text editor where we write the Python instructions into a file. By convention, these Python scripts, they have the names, file names, which is ended with .py extension. Okay, to execute this script, okay, you have to tell this Python interpreter the name of the file with extension. Say that if I want to execute hello.py. Okay, so this is hello is my file name and .py is the extension. Okay, so hello.py, you have to use the file name along with the extension. Then the executable file, the Python interpreter will look into that script and execute that particular file. Okay, now what is a program? Basically, the definition of program, it is you can tell it is like most basic is a sequence of Python statements that have to be like crafted to do something, that are designed to do some process, right? It is going to perform a task, right? In generally we can tell it's a program comprises of set of instructions or like statements related to the specific language. If I use Python, I tell about Python statements. So program comprises of sequence of Python statements which are designed or crafted to do some particular task. Okay, now for example, let us say that we are doing some social computing research on Facebook posts, and you are interested in most frequently used word in a series of posts. Okay, like there are a lot many posts and you want to find out which is the most frequently used word. Okay, um, then you can write a simple program. Okay, so that it just go through the entire statements of your posts. Okay, and it tries to find the most common word and how many times it occurs. Okay, say you have a paragraph of a post, of each and every post it will try to look into that most commonly used word will be picked up, and it will also tell the number of times it has been utilized, for which you need to write a code. Okay, and if you run it in the Python interpreter, then it is going to execute it, which is the big word, which is the most commonly used word, or which is the more number of times used word. It all depends on the program that we write. Okay, Now let us talk about how basically we are going to build the blocks of programs. Okay, so consider uh, the Python programs. Okay, uh, that like a part of every programming language, okay, from the machine language up to high level language. Okay, there are some constructs which are not just for Python programs. Okay, so these construct what I can say, there are some conceptual patterns which we use to construct a program. Okay, now what are those uh, conceptual patterns that we use to construct a program? Okay, say that first is initially input, next output, third is sequential execution, next conditional execution, next repeated execution, and the last is reuse. Okay, so it's a conceptual pattern we are talking. Fine. So what does an input does? Like the building blocks of your program, it tries to get the data from the outside world or from the user, and this might be like you are getting the reading the data from a file, or even some kind of information, audio, video, or getting the information from sensors like microphones or GPS. Okay, some input will be like fetched from the outside world to the processor, and in our initial programs our input will come from typing the data on the keyboard. That is the classical or conventional way of sending the input data to the processor. Next is output. In case of output, the processed data will be displayed as a result of your program on a screen or a monitor, or you try to store them in a file, or you will try to write them to a device like speakers, where you are going to play some music, or like speak text. Okay, so any further depending on the need, you will be displaying your output. Now when we talk about the sequential execution, it is going to execute or perform the statements one after the other. Okay. Sequential execution, it tries to perform or execute the statements one after the other in order to uh, perform the task sequentially. And here in case of sequential execution, they are encountered in an orderly manner or orderly format before it is taken for execution. Now when we talk about the conditional execution, it is executing the instruction based on certain conditions. Okay, if at all the condition is satisfied, then execute it or skip the sequence of statements. Okay, so based on if at all a condition is satisfied, then it tries to execute or skip that sequence. Okay, next we have repeated execution. It tries to perform some set of statements repeatedly. Say that I am in a loop and I just want to repeat the work continuously, then I try to repeat the work for multiple number of times. And the last block of program, we call it as reuse. Here in case of reuse, we write a set of instructions once, give the name, one name for that particular instruction or a program, and then you reuse those instructions as and when it is required, or whenever it is needed throughout your program. You can recall or you can reuse that set of instructions which is given with a specific name. And yeah, these are all the building blocks of Python programming. Now we could finally just tell that what could possibly go wrong. Okay, because saying something or putting something in front of the other, it is like an art. Okay, you're programming, it's an art of creating something. Okay, or you're going to compose something, okay, which is through these basic elements called as like instructions. And you are trying to focus on some tasks to be executable. Okay, so which requires the basic building blocks before you program. Next, what are those errors? What could possibly go wrong? Okay, say that you have written a program, okay, and you will encounter basically three general types of errors. Okay, one may be the syntax error, next is logic errors, other one is semantic errors. Okay, so what are the syntax error we are talking? So these are the first errors you will make. That means, and it is definitely easy to fix up these errors while typing the instruction or while typing the syntax. Okay, you will violate some grammatical rules of Python. Right? So because of that, the syntax or the sentence will go wrong, or it is changed. Okay, so because of that, you try to land up in a grammatical mistake of Python, where Python does its best to point right at the line, and specifically even with respect to the character where it is noticed. Okay, and the only tricky bit of syntax error is that sometimes the mistake that needs fixing is actually earlier in the program than where Python noticed. Okay, so it was like confused. So the line character that Python indicates in a syntax error may just be like starting point of your investigation. Okay, say for example, you have an error in third line, okay, but it is focusing on the fifth line, and it is giving a hint for you that your error starting from fifth, and it is like giving a reverse way of analysis that it is the problem is in the third line. Okay, so quite confusing, but if at all a user is violating the rules and regulations of syntax, then it is termed to be the syntax error. Now when we talk about the logical error, okay, where the logical error is when your program has good syntax. Okay, that means there is no mistake at all in your instructions. Your syntax is absolutely perfect. Okay, but there is a mistake. There is a mistake with respect to the statements what you have written. Okay, maybe like it is mistakes in like how the statements relate to one another. Okay, and it's a logic error. Basically, a good example of logic error, like mm, yeah, take a drink from your water bottle, put it put it in your backpack. Okay, walk to the library and then put the top back on the bottle. What is the meaning of it? Do you think it is logically sounds good? No, right? So logical error is that your words are correct. Okay, there is absolutely no mistake in the word, whatever you have written. Okay, grammatical mistake is, I mean, each and every word is correct, but the way you have used the words is having a logic error. Okay, now when you talk about the semantic errors, okay, these are the errors which occur when your description of steps, okay, to take syntactically perfect and in the right order. Okay, fine. You are supposed to follow the path of execution, or the flow should be in a right order. Okay, but sometimes what happens, there is simply a mistake in the program, and the program is perfectly all right, but it does not do what you intended for it. Okay, what you are expecting it is not doing, just because of the semantic error, where you are not at all putting the steps in a proper order, right order. Okay, it is not syntactically perfect. Okay, so those errors are termed to be the semantic errors. Okay, so these are all the errors that you possibly find when you actually learn the when you actually write the Python. Okay,